Scott, what's going on today, man? I know you're in the midst of several projects, coming off the Tucker interview, new book out. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Well, I got my new podcast with Daryl Cooper, which is named after my most recent book, Provoked. And that's why I have a heart out, is because I got to record that show right after this one today. And that's The Great Martyr Made, of course. And we just started this new podcast for 3 weeks running now. I think we're only five. This will be our sixth episode today. We're 5 weeks in. And for the last 3 weeks, we've been the number one new podcast on Apple. And so in the first week, we were nothing. On the second week, we were number 8. And then we've been number 1 in new podcasts on Apple since then, which is pretty cool. So that's Provoked. And that's me and Daryl. And then I'm working on a big project with Tom Woods, the great libertarian, Mises Institute guy, and also from my Libertarian Institute as well. And he set me up with, if you're familiar with the Tom Woods Liberty Classroom, where it's Tom and a bunch of his great professor friends telling you real history and economics and all kinds of stuff like that. Well, he's setting up for me my own one of those, which is called the Scott Horton Academy. Oh, here, you see. The Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom. And it's going to be me doing gigantic courses on basically my last 2 books, Enough Already and Provoked, about the Middle East and the Cold War with Russia. But then I also have James Bovard on 40 years of investigative journalism. Just absolutely tons of great stuff from him. He's still sending them in. And then I've got the great Ramzi Baroud, the Palestinian refugee and brilliant intellectual and keeper of the Palestine Chronicle and professor. And he's doing a course on Israel-Palestine. And then I've got William Bupert, who is Army Special Forces, I guess he was a contractor working with the Special Forces, but he was an Army officer before he left. And maybe he was a Ranger. But anyway, he is an expert on debunking counterinsurgency. His main job is he has this great podcast called Chasing Ghosts. But he's
I've had Bill on here before.
Oh, you know Bill?
Yeah,
Great.
Yep.
So we're all in the same gang, like they used to say.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike.
And so Bill is doing How America Lost Every War Since 1945. And then CJ Kilmer is doing a course on how Woodrow Wilson is the worst person who ever lived. And so, I could have done the course myself, but I got to delegate. So CJ is doing that one. And then, so that's going to be and then Tom Woods has a new guy. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say his name yet or if I've memorized it yet, but Tom Woods brought on a guy that I don't know yet, who is going to do a scholarly course on how all this Darbyite, dispensational, premillennialist, gotta support Israel to force Jesus to come back stuff is a bunch of hooey. And so he's going to show like whatever doctrinal thing about that, which I need to talk to Tom a little bit more about that and find out a little bit more about the guy and whatever, but looks like that's going forward. I mean, it's presumed to be also part of the course, the first course. So we plan to be debuting the first of the courses next month, although we'll see how that goes. It's a lot of work to get it all together. But you can go to scotthortonacademy.com and put in your email address there and watch a great video by Dan Smots. And then you'll be the first to know when we go live.
Well, why do you think that the success and traction with your show with Daryl Cooper has taken off so much?
Probably mostly because of him. If I'm not sure if you've ever subscribed to the Martyr Made podcast, but it's highly renowned for very good reason. He does these incredible deep dives into historical topics such as the Jim Jones thing, the foundation of Israel. He has a podcast that's 25 hours leading up to 1948 and the establishment of the Israeli state there. It's incredible stuff. And then he's got one on the miners of West Virginia, Mother Jones, and the war against the Pinkerton thugs, or whichever group of mercs it was that they were fighting up there. And then he's got a whole thing about the Great Migration and the relations between blacks and Jews in New York City, especially when blacks moved from the South to New York City after World War II in large numbers. And then they had to, all these different relations and whatever. I know he's supposedly controversial, but like, if you listen to that, you just see what a big heart the guy has. He's a total, stoic and a sincere Christian and a nice guy. And it's funny, he's very controversial because people misunderstood what he said. And honestly, like, I swear I would not lie for the guy if I needed to, screw that. But what happened was he said two things about World War II. And the first one was Churchill was the chief villain, which of course he set that up by saying, I like to pick on my Anglo friend and poke him about this a little bit because he's a Churchill worshiper. And then I go, well, because Churchill did so much to turn that war into what it became. It was not all as inevitable as people might think. Much of it was maybe or whatever, but there's a huge role that England played in causing the worst thing that ever happened. And then, so there's a point to be made there. If you've read Pat Buchanan's book, or if you're interested at all, there's Pat Buchanan's great book. It's called Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War, which makes a really great case along these lines. And H.A.P. Taylor, who's the British historian, wrote the book on the origins of World War II. And I could also recommend Human Smoke, which is light on narrative, but heavy on just newspaper clippings all the way through, showing all the different off-ramps and all the way the wars could have been prevented. But the problem is, so here he's on Tucker, and it's right before the election. So if they can get Tucker, they can get Trump. And so if they can get Daryl, they can get Tucker, they think, right? So this is when they're trying to say like, oh no, Tony Hinchcliffe told a joke or what, you know what I mean? They're pretending to be upset about every single thing, trying to help Biden win or help Harris win last fall. And so, but then Daryl also said a thing, and he was making a point that people just took the opposite because they just heard him said something where Churchill's worse than Hitler. What? That's weird. And then he says something about the starvation of Nazi prisoners in the East. And what he's actually saying was that even if you were a Holocaust denier and you were trying to spin for the Germans, even you would have to admit that they took possession of millions of people with no plan to take care of them whatsoever. And so many of them starved to death. And it was an exact, direct consequence of what they had done. So even the worst, pro-German spinster or spinmeister or whatever would have to concede even that. But then people took it the other way around 100%, 180 degrees and said, what he was saying was, that's all the Holocaust was oops, we weren't quite prepared to take care of all of our new captives. But that wasn't what he was saying. But people, they just heard him say something that Churchill was worse than Hitler. Now he's saying something about starvation in the camp. So they took that really wrong. And then it metamorphosed very quickly. Is that how you pronounce that? Something like that? Into, you say it.
Metamorphosized.
Okay, good. And then and then it turned into Tucker's hanging around with a Holocaust denier, which was not true. But that was what they turned that into. But then a lot of people heard what he was actually saying in context. They're sick and tired of woke cancellation stuff. All his friends stood by him, and he's fine. It's fine. However, there still are a lot of people who get that wrong. So I'd like to correct the record because a lot of people just sincerely misunderstood or they were told wrong. They only heard the one clip, but they don't understand the real context of what he was saying. And I think he even went off onto a tangent and that's why the Israelis have such an obligation to feed the Gazans as they're murdering them, is because they have taken over the place. So they are responsible for their well-being while they're just killing the crap out of them all. And that's part of Daryl's problem too, is he likes tangents, and sometimes, just like me, sometimes he has a hard time backtracking to wait, where were we again? I needed to wrap up this point that I had brought up but not quite tied up. You know what I mean? So I think that might have been part of it too, where if he'd been able to stop and take a breath, he might have said, oh, you know what? Let me say a couple more things about that. But instead they started talking about something else. And so whatever. But anyway, so that's a long as hell answer to your question. Why does everybody like your show so much? Because Daryl's so great and brings all these eyeballs. And then I hope I can contribute a little bit. But mostly, see, I'm an interview host when I'm not being interviewed. That's my real job. So I mostly sit around interviewing him. Has been 4 out of 5 shows so far. You know.
Well, and also I think what I found was funny. I don't watch a lot of Rogan stuff, but when Douglas Murray was on there with Dave Smith, and they spent like an hour talking about Daryl, and I'm like, okay, you're literally spending an hour talking about a guy that's not even there to defend himself or have a conversation, but yet you're basically implying. I mean, I had to turn it off after a while because I was like, you're implying that he's not even allowed to discuss it.
Right.
Like you're so arrogant. You're so arrogant that you can talk about things, but yet nobody else can.
Right. And then his whole thing was like, oh, yeah, you haven't been, you don't have the expertise. And then he goes, yeah, what's this guy, Derek something? He's a fascist. Like, what? Give me a break, dude. But you know what? And that whole thing was an absolute disaster for Douglas Murray and his career and his entire future. But also, that was almost like the dying last gasp of, we get to tell you what to do. I mean, if you remember, the National Review ran this thing of all the never Trumpers put their name on the front cover of the National Review saying conservative Republicans are not allowed to vote for this guy in 2015. And everyone's like, hey, if Jonah Goldberg is against it, then I'm for it, because he's the guy who lied us into Iraq and we'll never forgive him. So I remember making fun of Jonah Goldberg and saying, how much is Trump paying you to do this, right? To line up all the absolute worst conservatives, that we all are the worst, especially the neocons, and their, fellow travelers during that time. Like, thank you for marginalizing yourselves. We're actually going to take your ultimatum and we're going to raise you one. Beat it. You know what I mean? So I think there's an element of that to all of this cancellation stuff now, right? Where it just doesn't work anymore. People are tired of being told who they're not allowed to be friends with and stuff.
Or even what they're allowed to discuss. I mean, it's been a few weeks now since your episode with Tucker aired. As you sit back and reflect, first of all, that people that haven't watched that conversation need to, because Tucker's on fire right now. I mean, you were on there. Oh, yeah. My friend Dave Collum, I'm waiting for that episode to come out, which I had an opportunity to hang out with him in person last month when I was in upstate New York.
Oh, that's cool. He's a great guy.
Oh yeah. You guys ever done a podcast together?
Yeah, I've interviewed him, I think twice, maybe 3 times in the past. And I cite him in my book because he's a chemist and he debunked the skip roll poison stuff, where they're saying, oh, this had to have come from Russia. And he was like, really? Because I made it a test in my college course to graduate my class. And what he did was he said, here's the poison molecule. Show me in 3 steps how to make it. And he said, every student in his class got it right except one. Okay. He's like, come on, man. And these are undergrads. This is not the grad students. These are like just,
yeah.
If you can do algebra 2, you can make this poison. You know what I mean?
Well, and so, so that episode hopefully should be any day now. But for yourself, as it's been a little while, it's been a few weeks, what are your thoughts on that conversation? And I mean, just overall where things are at, especially in, relation to the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as, the experience or whatever, I think it couldn't have gone better. I mean, it was exactly as I had hoped it would be, really, for a very long time leading up to that I know that he knows about everything I'm going to tell him. But I know he doesn't know a lot of what I'm going to tell him. But I do know that he knows enough that when I tell him, he's going to know I'm right. When I go, remember this guy? Well, he was the one who did this, but then he was also the one who did that. I knew that he would be like, yeah, I know that guy. I've been to dinner with him. He's a really nice guy. I wonder why he likes the taste of blood so much. Or like whatever, you know what I mean? Or I know that guy, he's a real jerk. His children hate him, or like some hilarious thing as Tucker does. He's so funny, dude. I love this guy. And from the moment I got there, the night before, he had me for dinner the night before and everything. From the moment I got there, we're the best of friends. And I'm just like, oh, this is just great, dude. And we stayed up to like 11:30 shooting the shit until I finally, he's like, all right, I got to kick you out of here and go to bed. And so I was like, all right, and left. And then the next day it was like, oh, hell yeah, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to walk through enough already, dude. We're just going to do all the wars in a row. I told him, look, I could just sit here and sound exactly like Dave on everything. But like my real comparative advantage is I can tell you one long story about all these wars in a row from then till now. And I promise I can do it all the way through. And he was like, word, let's do that. Blam, let's do that. And then that was where we started. 1953, what happened in 1953? And then on from there. And So it was really great, and I'm so appreciative of him. And he's just been so nice to me. He's been really great. So, and then by the way, John Mearsheimer was on there yesterday and killed. He was so good.
I didn't get a chance to listen to that yet.
It's funny because I paid quite a bit of attention to him, and I cite him quite a bit in the book, but at the same time, like there's a lot of what he told Tucker that sounds exactly like what I say, that I know I didn't get from him, and I sure as hell know he didn't get it from me. But we just agree that much, where it's just like, man, I'm almost jealous. Like, dude, if I was sitting right there, I would have said that exact same thing. It's just Tucker didn't interview me about Provoked. He interviewed me about enough already. But like, if we'd done the Provoked interview, it would have been exactly like that. Basically, he's just great. It made so many of the same points. It's really awesome. Which he did endorse my book, so he at least took some kind of good look at it. But not that he cribbed any of that from me. I'm just joshing that part, but you understand. But just so I'm like proud of that. That like on the great minds think alike thing. That like I ain't too much less good than John goddamn Mearsheimer, man. Like that's pretty good,
Well,
So, yeah.
one of the things that you said in that conversation that stuck out to me was the 60% nuclear or the enrichment from Iran. And you simplified it. I have to have things explained to me like I'm 5 years old, Scott, to grasp things.
Problem.
And when you said that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And if you wouldn't mind, like just discussing that.
Sure. So here's the deal with, I'll have to backtrack a little bit here. So there's this place called Persia. It's run by the Ayatollah. They've had a nuclear program since 2005 or so. It's when they started enriching uranium, really 2006. They started really enriching uranium and mastering the fuel cycle. And so they have cascades of centrifuges, which just means large groups of them. They pass hexafluoride gas, uranium hexafluoride gas, from chamber to chamber to chamber, spinning it around in these centrifuges, separating the uranium-235 from the uranium-238 isotopes. The 235 is the sweet stuff. So if you're going to run a nuclear reactor for your electricity program, all you need is to enrich up to 3.67%, thereabouts. That's about the limit of what they've been doing. Then there's another threshold where you could use 20% enriched uranium-235 for, say, a medical isotope reactor. And what it is you use this for targets, for whatever, to irradiate something. This would be for radioactive dyes that they use for like some examinations, or for chemotherapy treatment, right? Or not chemo, but you understand, radiation cancer treatment. And so at least the last time I looked into this, Canada had the only other 20% medical isotope reactor for these isotopes in the world, or at least in the Western world at that time. It's been a little while since I looked into that. But so there is a legitimate demand for that. At the same time, don't nobody be naive. What the Ayatollah is doing by mastering the fuel cycle is creating creating a latent nuclear deterrent. I emphasize was now, and I'll get to this in a second, but we don't know where they're at now and what they're doing now. That's a separate question. But for all the time leading up to the month before this last one, in June, when Israel and then America went to war against them, the deal was they were building up a latent deterrent, which means instead of having a nuclear weapons deterrent, we got nuclear weapons, don't you mess with us, which is the posture of the nuclear weapon states, right? They said, we could make nuclear weapons, don't you mess with us. And this is essentially the same. And I don't believe that these other countries have ever said this explicitly either. But the implication is clear for you to infer from the Brazilians, from the Germans, from the Japanese, that they master the fuel cycle. They're not dependent on foreign sources of nuclear material, at least as far as this goes, that they could make a bomb or two or three or enough to keep everybody away. But they don't feel like they have the need to do that. Why escalate tensions in the region? Who does Brazil need to nuke to keep at bay? Nobody, right? So, but at the same time, it'd be a good way to guarantee our independence and make sure nobody messes with us. It would be to have a nuclear capability, right? Same thing here. Now, a nuclear potential, it would be a better way to say it, because, this lingo, sometimes the jargon has particular meanings in certain contexts, right? So nuclear capability sounds like saying a nuclear weapons capability, which means like actual weapons in some context, which is not what I'm saying. I'm saying just like Japan. Everybody knows the Japanese can make a nuke, but we all know that they don't want to. And China ain't coming. And so I don't know if the Japanese have ever said this to the Chinese at all, even on TV. But surely the context is, yeah, and you guys aren't thinking about coming either, right? Because obviously the Japanese know that the Chinese have nukes. And it's a much bigger, more populous country. The balance of power has shifted quite a bit in the last 80 years, let's say. And so, but we don't feel the need to make a nuke because you guys aren't making us feel that paranoid or apprehensive. And so we're just going to sit right here on our latent nuclear capability rather than making nukes and getting into a game of brinksmanship with our larger, wealthier neighbor, right? So that was what the Ayatollah was doing, was creating the ability to make nuclear weapons. Now, the Israelis' position has always been that for Iran to have a nuclear program at all is a nuclear weapons threat to them and is intolerable and must not stand. And so anytime that they say, and they demand that the Americans promise that they will never let Iran have a nuclear weapon, that what the Israelis mean by that is we'll not allow them to have a nuclear program at all. Whereas Bush and Obama had both given in that, well, they're going to have some enrichment. But then, and that was the Obama deal of 2015, just very quickly added on a lot of restrictions and rolled back the program and expanded inspections in exchange for sanctions relief that never really came, and giving them some of their own money back, which they never really got either. But that was supposed to be the deal, their own money that Jimmy Carter had stolen back during the revolution. And so, and as part of that deal, which they made with the entire UN Security Council, including the United States, that they again forswore nuclear weapons and they expanded this inspections regime. And so the idea was that as long as they don't make nuclear weapons, or as long as they don't break out of the treaty and begin to try to make nuclear weapons, then we won't attack them. And as long as we don't attack them, they won't break out and try to make nuclear weapons. Great. Everybody shake hands. Status quo holds. There's nothing to fight about. Except you got Benjamin Netanyahu riding in your motorcycle sidecar over here, says that that ain't good enough, right? And so he went ahead and started this war. Now, oh, I'm sorry. You asked about the 60%. Don't let me get too far ahead of myself. Forgive me. So in 2018, Donald Trump comes in and he tears up Obama's deal at Benjamin Netanyahu's behest. Now, it wasn't a perfect deal. Donald Trump said it's the worst deal anybody ever made in history or whatever. Come on. He could have said to the Ayatollah, look, man, I don't like this deal, but my predecessor did sign it, and a deal's a deal, but I want to revise it. But I'm not going to force you, but I would like to sit down and talk about some of these sunset provisions. I mean, man, if you really aren't making nukes, then I think it's fair that we ask that we lift these sunset provisions and make some of these things permanent. And you know what? Maybe we'll figure out a way to get you some more civilian airline parts or whatever it is that they need to get the deal done, Mr. Dealmaker. But instead, it's no, whatever Netanyahu and Sheldon Adelson say. And so Netanyahu just went along. Donald Trump, same difference, I guess, just went along with that and tore up the deal. So the thing is, in the deal, it stipulates that if America stops abiding by parts of it, then Iran has the right to stop abiding by parts of it without necessarily repudiating the entire deal. It's actually in the deal that they can stay in the deal, but stop abiding by at least some of the restrictions. So that's what they were doing. But they still had to deal with the rest of the UN Security Council powers. But it was essentially in suspended animation because of what America had done. So then the Israelis go on this assassination campaign and sabotage campaign against their scientists and against the Natanz facility and all that in 21 in Biden years. Now, Biden comes in, by the way, after Trump, and he doesn't say, didn't I tell you this guy's a wacko? We're getting right back in good old Obama's deal. Wasn't he Obama's vice president? No, he did not do that. He kept Trump's maximum pressure campaign, demanding that Iran just come to heel when they already did. And saying, but now you just have to give in, even though we're not going to give you anything. We're just going to put more and more sanctions and threats. And that was Antony Blinken's policy. I don't know if Biden remembered he even had an Iran policy to pursue or anything, or who knows with this senile head. And so they just essentially pursued the same maximum pressure campaign with very few negotiations of any kind during the Biden years Then Trump comes back in, and well, in fact, even still during Biden, it was after the sabotage at Natanz, which Israel took credit for, in April of 2021, was when Israel started enriching up to 60%. And now, I don't know if you saw
Iran.
this, but,
You mean Iran enriching up to 60%? 21.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So you may have seen Mike Baker on the Joe Rogan show. And Rogan brought this point up that maybe the 60% was just for leverage in the negotiations. And Baker just says, well, 60% is on the way to 90%. Like, that doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? And Marco Rubio said the same thing when he was justifying the war. He said, well, listen, the only countries that have 60% are nuclear weapons states. Well, but that's a non sequitur. That doesn't mean anything. The nuclear weapon states don't have 60% because 60% isn't good for anything. So it obviously the question raises itself. Why didn't they just go up to 90% weapons grade, 90% uranium-235 and make a dang nuclear bomb then, dude? Why didn't they just do that? Why stop at 60? And Baker and Rubio just kind of lied over that point. But there is an obvious answer to that, which is the purpose of enriching up to 60% is to make the Americans more apprehensive that, geez, our maximum pressure policy isn't working and is in fact backfiring, and we should maybe get back into the deal that we already had, or one similar to it, where, yes, we recognize Iran is going to keep enrichment. They're never going to give up enrichment until the Ayatollah is dead and gone and his next 10 replacements, right? Until the regime is overthrown and the sock puppet monarch's son is reinstalled in power. Like, that's not going to happen, dude. So they're not going to give up enrichment. America is going to have to settle for that. Should have already. Trump should have never torn up that deal at Netanyahu's behest. And the problem is now, it's based on this phony pretext, right? We all know that Tulsi Gabbard said, well, they haven't broken out toward a nuke. They're not making a nuke. They have not made a decision that we're going to make nukes now, because we know what that would look like. They would have to kick the inspectors out of the country and, at least in practice, withdraw from the NPT, because under the non-proliferation treaty, they promised to have an agreement with the safeguards agreement with the IAEA. So if they're kicking the inspectors out, they're like nullifying the most important aspect of that treaty, not just the second most important aspect, one, their promise, but two, the enforcement mechanism, the inspection mechanism to make sure. And so, and the thing is, man, I have to say too, I'm sure you may feel this way, and I'm sure your audience maybe already are mad at me because of how much they feel the same way too, that I despise Donald Trump and his enemies so much. Like, as soon as I'm off with you, I'm going to go rant about Russiagate for an hour and a half with Daryl, right? Like, I want to see Donald Trump crush his enemies in the intelligence community and the FBI and the Democrats who framed him for treason. I hate them more than he does, and I don't care what law he has to break to persecute them and destroy them. Like, sick them, Donald. Like, I feel that empathy for the truth, if not particularly for him, but for any president. If they'd done that to Hillary Clinton, I'd have been just as pissed off. And I hate her. But it's not okay to frame a president for treason, dude. You know, your own president. And so I want very badly to be sympathetic to Trump. I am in so many ways. And of course, our last 20-year jihad of cultural wokist, leftist, social justice warriorness, like, had to be put to an end. Those people had to get finally, like, the football stiff arm in the face and be made to fall down hard and be quiet for a while and leave people alone a bit. And like that whole, like, Cartman's shirt, woke is dead, on the new South Park. Like, oh God, we needed that. Like, we all needed that. This culture needed that so badly. So I do not in any way, like, regret the left's loss here at all. When I rail about Trump, a lot of it is because it's like, on a scale of 1 to Ron Paul, I want him to be Ron Paul. And Zionism is his Achilles heel, man. It's just the worst. And by the way, I could totally settle for Pat. Buchanan, right? Like Ron Paul's good on everything. I really just need a right winger to be really good on war. You know what I mean? I don't care. Fine, he's protectionist and all that. I'm not for that. We could argue about that another day. He doesn't want to destroy the welfare state overnight. That does bother me. But you know what? A lot of other things bother me too, like the world empire, especially that. Let's stop that. Let's solve that. Like, that's all I need from the guy, is to really be America first. He don't want to be America first. He can't hold on to America first. He's got to be Israel instead. And it's the thing that just, it ruins his policy, when clearly all he had to do was, and in fact, he was in the middle of negotiations. He was making real progress in his negotiations. And I think he agreed. He let Netanyahu convince him to drop the negotiations, to use them essentially only as a ruse, to prepare to attack, and to keep the Iranians off guard, so they didn't have their officers in secret locations, but would be easier to kill on a first strike. And then they went ahead and did it. And now, just as me and every anti-war guy on this subject for the last 20, 25 years has been warning that now they're likely to break out and make a nuke, right? Like, I never said that God told the Ayatollah you can never make a nuke, okay? What I said was that the Ayatollah claimed that God told him that, okay? And that was the law. It clearly was. I'm not just saying anyone should ever believe a politician, especially not a theocrat, the supreme leader since 89. Give me a break. I'm not saying anyone should trust the guy. I am saying examine the reality. His fatwa was the law. And Khomeini started. Saddam Hussein, with American help, was using chemical weapons against Iran. And the IRGC came to the Ayatollah and said, hey, we got the chemicals. All we got to do is mix them together and we have weapons. And he said, absolutely not. Weapons of mass destruction are haram. No. And this is when Saddam was gassing Iranian cities. And the Ayatollah, mean old Ayatollah with the dark circles around his eyes, that guy said, absolutely not. And that applies to nukes too. And it has under him and his successor since 89, Khomeini. And so they just haven't been making nukes. Well, but now this was their bluff. Trump called their bluff. Oh, yeah? Well, I bomb your nuclear facilities. How about that? NPT won't protect you from me. And so he did not succeed in destroying every last centrifuge. I don't know if he succeeded in burying the guys alive down there and sealing all the tunnels down to Fordo and Natanz and whatever. The best intelligence I've seen says he must have done some good damage to some of them. We know he did destroy the most important parts of the Isfahan facility, where they do the conversion of uranium metal to uranium hexafluoride gas and then back again. And so in that sense, if they're going to make any more highly enriched or weapons grade, or any at all weapons grade enriched uranium metal, they're going to need that conversion facility. I'm not sure where they're going to get it, or how long it would take them to get it going, or hell, if they have a second secret Death Star nobody knows about already under construction. They did claim that at one point, that like, dude, we already have a secret, more deeply buried facility where we're ready to begin enrichment, or we already are, or whatever. So I think that, like, in maybe the Guinness Book of World Records for worst self-fulfilling prophecies, that America and Israel and America may very well have forced I'm also used to saying this about North Korea, forced the Iranians to go ahead and break out and make nuclear weapons, whereas before they had settled for don't make me. And this is what they did to North Korea too. There's the best article on this is by my old friend Gordon Prather. It's called How Bush Pushed North Korea to Nukes. And it was just how he and John Bolton just lied and lied and lied in 2002, and threatened and sanctioned and cajoled and bullied the North Koreans until they finally left the treaty and decided to start making nuclear weapons. And it's the same kind of thing here. And like, I have to say, like, you know, I read a lot, and I very often read people who are a hell of a lot smarter than me, and clearly are deeper thinkers and heavier analysts than I am in so many ways. You know what I mean? I don't sell myself long, right? Like, if anything, short, but I don't even think so. But like, it's quite apparent, right? Donald Trump knows far less about this subject even than you do now that I just briefed you on it, man. That like he doesn't know or care about this stuff. He doesn't understand the long-term context. He doesn't understand how actually, man, the status quo is not that bad. We should stick with this and maybe we can make a little better by getting back in the deal. But you let the Israelis convince you that to have a nuclear program at all is the same thing as having a nuclear weapons program and that we must destroy it. Well, you just signed us up for a nasty future here, because now look at where we are at the end of July, where we don't know exactly what they got, but we do know it's not all gone. We know that they have avowed publicly, repeatedly, that they are still enriching uranium. They still will enrich uranium, that they are not backing down from that, that it's their sovereign right as an independent state and as a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And so screw you guys. We're enriching uranium. You did not stop us. And so, and that any new negotiations are going to have to begin with America accepting that fact. Well, and meanwhile, they kicked the inspectors from the IAEA out of the country. So now my whole long rap about how no, man, with the slightest of exceptions that are mountains out of molehills and don't amount to anything, the IAEA has been able to continuously verify the non-diversion of nuclear material in Iran to any military purpose. Now that is severely called into question. Now the chain of custody is broken. Now, like, are we sure we know every last bit of enriched material that they have now, while we didn't have inspectors there to see it? And again, I'm not one to presume the innocence of the Ayatollah. I'm the one who literally, and I can prove this, man. You can go just use the search filters on YouTube and look back for the Bush and Obama years where I'm talking about this stuff in speeches and debates way back then, that if we bomb them, that's what's going to cause them to break out and make a nuke, more likely than anything. And if that proves wrong, they still don't make a nuke, then great. But that's the real danger here, because if they now, and Trump already said, by the way, well, I'll just keep bombing you then. And they said, well, we're just going to keep enriching then. So now where does that leave us? Now we got to do a regime change to finally put an end to it. If that's the ladder they're going to go down, that's the maybe the chute they're going to go down, where we keep bombing them and they keep thumbing their nose, then what? Now we got to send in the 82nd Airborne. Now we got to drop huge bombs on every government building in Tehran. Now we got to what, right? Some crazy, stupid, horrible, nihilistic thing, including potentially even sending ground troops to enforce this idiot decision that we will not stand for civilian levels of enriched uranium. And again, specifically on the 60%, if we could have got back into the deal, the 60% would have gone away. They'd have sent it to France or to Russia to have them dilute it down back to usable levels for the electricity program and ship it back in the form of fuel rods. And then they used it in their reactor. They have no use for 60% uranium. Again, this is why Mike Baker and Marco Rubio, in those two examples, they just kind of have to obfuscate. Well, 60% something is like kind of close to nuclear weapons, which, like, yes, it is. That's right. Like, it's in these cascades, it's like a parabola of some kind, right? Where, like, the more enriched it is, the easier it is to further enrich it because it's already separated and the weights, however it works. I'm not a scientist, man, but like, yeah, but that is the point. But what is the point? That, yes, it's closer. But what does that signify? It signifies a threat, a not too bad of one, right? It signifies a potential. You see where I'm going with this? I could make nukes, the thing you say you're trying to prevent. Just let's talk and get back into a deal where this becomes not a problem anymore. That was entirely the Iranians' position here. And they would say, oh, well, you're just a fool to believe that or whatever. Why? They've proven they've been able to enrich uranium since 2006. They've proven they mastered the fuel cycle then. They haven't made a bomb this whole time. And I speak as a victim too, right? Like, for your audience, they spent their whole lifetimes hearing that, oh my God, Iran is a dangerous nuclear weapons threat. I spent a lot of my life driving for a living. I'm a talk radio junkie, right? It's why I'm like this. And you know how many times I heard on the top of the hour radio news from ABC News or CBS News or Fox News Dun, 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 dun. It's time for the top of the hour news. The Israelis say the Iranians are making nuclear bombs, so we're going to have to start a war real soon. Oh my God. I've been hearing that like since the turn of the century.
I'm not even plugged in like you, Scott, and I've been hearing it.
Of course. So is everyone in your audience has heard that. That's what I mean. Like if you drive for a living and listen to AM radio, you would have to wonder, man, why do the Iranians suck so bad at making nuclear bombs that they haven't figured out how to get their hands on a single one yet? Isn't this 1944 technology we're talking about here? What in the world? And the answer is because they didn't try. That's why. Obviously, they could. And now, how deliverable that would be and all the time frames involved and all that is a more complicated discussion. But that's the easy answer to why 60%. Because, hey, why not 90? Why not 20 or 3.6? Why 60? 60 is essentially useless as far as like any particular thing. I mean, you could burn it in your reactor depending on how the reactor is configured, I guess, and if you have a heavy water reactor. But you can't make a nuclear bomb with 60% enriched uranium. So it was purely a negotiating chip, right? It's trying to raise the tension so we have something to negotiate away. They did the same thing in Obama years. In fact, I need to go back. I'm only saying that from memory, but I'm like 89% sure of that. I need to go back and look at that. But I'm virtually positive that during the negotiations with Obama, or maybe preceding them in Obama's first term, I think they may have been exceeding 20%. And it was like, okay, look, we're still not breaking out toward a nuke, but and they're like publicly doing so, right? They're not secretly doing so and being exposed for it. They're publicly doing so because they're trying to raise the tension so they have a way to lower it without going all the way to abandoning enrichment altogether, right? Does that make sense? Like if I got to negotiate away some guns, I'm going to get more first and then negotiate away some, right? It was still without buying a tank, though.
I just wonder, too, though, I don't know, my time's limited with you, but I wonder is like when they did the bombing that night and they came into Iranian airspace, there was no missiles shot up.
The Israelis got it. The Israelis, and I had underestimated their ability to do this and perhaps overestimated Iran. Iran had some SM-300 Russian anti-aircraft rockets, missiles. And the SM-400s are supposedly the best kind that the Russians have. And I don't think the Iranians had any of those, but I was under the impression they had quite a few of these 300s, but the Israelis just took their asses out. They had, all the intelligence they needed, probably provided by American satellites to show. And they went in there and were able to completely neutralize them. I don't think they got a single Israeli jet. And by the time the Americans flew in there in their B-2s, they had total air dominance over at least that part of the country. I don't know if they had need to fly around every last bit of the country, but apparently they just hit them with cruise missiles first, flew the planes in later without a care in the world, which, I guess outdated information was that was a big part of what stopped the war back in the Bush years, was that they would have had to send in a lot of special operations guys with laser pointers. That satellite guidance wasn't going to be enough. They needed guys on the ground with laser designators to take out that anti-aircraft, and they thought that would be too difficult to do. The Israelis, on the other hand, apparently infiltrate a lot of guys into the country. I don't know if to use laser designators or not, but to do sabotage and bomb attacks and different things in the country at the onset of the deal. So I'm sorry for my long-winded answer. It's hard to explain the 60% without the story surrounding it. But
no, I appreciate that. Do you expect this to pick back up then?
I do. I'm so sorry to say that I think we do not have a resolution here. Either Donald Trump just says, fine, you can enrich uranium. Didn't I always say they could enrich uranium? Sure, they could enrich uranium. Or war. Because the Iranians aren't giving it up, man. And in fact, again, I suspect that now they probably are going to make a nuke. Or I can say to you explicitly that they are more likely to make nukes now. They are more likely to be making nukes today, when we know for a fact they were not in May. It sucks, dude. American foreign policy sucks, dude. It's just, God.
I get so much shit because I criticized the night that the bombs were dropped over there, and I said, how does this benefit me? I'm in Phoenix. What do I have to gain from this? I got called selfish. I got called, oh, it's our democracy in the Middle East. I go, okay, so you don't have an answer for me.
Israel's a democracy? Yeah, tell that to their Palestinian captives, the 6 million slaves they keep on their plantation there and murder all day for fun. Little toddlers they snipe in the head and laugh, snipe in the genitals and laugh their heads off, have a contest over who can snipe the most children in the parts. Ha ha ha, I got another one. They're just grasshoppers. They're just insects. We could kill them. That's the Israeli way. Oh, the only democracy in the Middle East. Try getting some other government's propaganda out of your ear hole. Just spread your ear wide open and let them have at you, huh? Have some self-respect. Jesus Christ, people.
That's the boomer generation, Scott. I mean, it's not all of them, but that's the mentality. The Fox News watchers from the 80s, you know, good guys, bad guys, like a superhero movie.
I guess so. And of course, once you're in your 70s and 80s, you stop being able to learn stuff. You know what I mean? So,
where can people find you, Scott?
I'm headed that way very quickly myself here. Quicker than most, while spinning at the same rate. No. I'm scotthorton.org. I am scotthortonshow.com, libertarianinstitute.org, antiwar.com, and amazon.com, and provoked.show.
I appreciate you making yourself available. I know you got tons of stuff going on, so I'd love to have you back, man. And
I'd love to do it.
I could talk to you for hours. So, but I appreciate it, and look forward to more conversations. And congrats on your success with Daryl. And thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it, man.
Mic drop.